go.
Okay.
So welcome to Fall Planting to Save Time and Money. We're coming to you from gardenataz.org. I'm Janet
I'm
McConovich,
Stephen Nicola.
and we're here with our good buddy Margaret Bird Thiel.
Well,
You'll see her in the chat if you are asking us questions.
Yeah.
That's me with my suspenders. Been wearing those for 35 years. Yeah, long time.
And
Steve.
that's me wearing dirty clothes like I usually do.
Yeah, Steve is often pretty dirty, and if he's not dirty, even if he is dirty, he's got a camera in his hands because he does most of the pictures for the things we do, and I do most of the words. Margaret is someone that we met 35 years ago, and realized that we had a soul mate here in horticulture. She's been in everything in horticulture.
Yep.
She's had jobs as an extension educator, as a plant salesman, as a nursery owner.
Excuse me.
As with me, we did a radio show for 3 years.
Yep.
She's written for the Landscape and Nursery Association magazine. She's with the radio show with me because she's one of the only other people who can answer just about anything,
Yep.
or at least give it a shot.
And she logically thinks about it. She doesn't talk right off the top of her head like some people are noted to do, like me.
So Margaret is here as our co-host in the chat today. So if you have questions as we go along, open your chat window. You'll find it at the bottom or top of your screen. Open your chat window and type in "to everyone" and put that there. Margaret will line up the questions. Sometimes other people in the chat answer questions very well, but we can take a look at it as it comes up. So questions go into chat, or wait for our question and answer session.
Which we do have a couple of them.
We've been writing for a long time, and the reason we do these webinars and the reason we keep writing is that once we started writing things that we had learned, we did 13 years with the Detroit News, writing our growing concerns column based on questions. The more questions that we got, the more things we looked into that we might not ever have run across on our own. And it taught us so much and keeps teaching us so much that we keep doing this kind of stuff. So we've written some books as well as writing the column for quite a long time. We wrote in the Michigan Gardener for about 10 years. And now we're doing almost all of our writing, and actually we're doing more webinars than anything.
Webinars have taken our time.
Our writing is on our audience materials pages this year. But it's on our website, gardenataz.org. We hope you do go there and use our search function to find articles. And I think everyone who's here is probably on our mailing list to get things when we send them out. Today, and in chat, I think we probably want to open chat and put it in again because people don't see it when they first come in. We're putting in a link right now that is the link for the handout. The link wasn't there.
I hit return. Oh, I hit shift.
The link was not there earlier, so our apologies for that. I just noticed it today that the link was not there. There are two things there on the list. One is this one, Fall Planting to Save Time and Money, which we're very quickly just going to tell you what it recaps today. We're not following in this order. It also tells you, if you go to that, if you go to our website, that you probably want the Plant It Well handout too, if you don't have that already.
And that's one of the webinars that you can see.
Yep, and we'll show
everybody
that.
Can see.
Yep, we'll show that to you a little bit later. But about fall planting, just to start and get this particular note list out of the way. We plant all year, Steve and I. We never stop planting. It might not be ideal at any particular time, but plants are just as glad to get out of the container at an ideal time as not.
We stick to Christopher Lloyd's philosophy of the time to do something in the garden generally is when you think of it.
When you think of it. And we can transplant anything any time of year, but fall has a lot going for it when it comes to planting. There's advantages to plants, advantages to gardeners. And what it used to be, planting time was fall. That was traditional. It was pushed at the nurseries. It was marketers in the 70s and 80s, 70s mostly, who realized that there was a great potential in people who were coming out of winter hibernation and anxious to buy things that they said,
especially things in bloom.
They said, let's grab these people, and spring is for gardening became the big thing, but fall is actually much better time to do it. Fall is when things root, when the soil is warmer than the air for part of the day. Plants make roots, and they make roots that while they're not making new leaves, so they have more water drawing capacity to support their foliage.
So by planting in the fall, you get 2 cool seasons rather than just one to help those roots grow, so that when the it starts to leaf out, it had 2 chances to increase its root capacity,
Yeah.
which then increases the amount of leaves.
Right. Yeah. And this is all happening invisibly. You don't see it, but in the spring, poof, that thing comes out much bigger than it would. Plus in the fall, everything's available. It's kind of tough in the spring.
Other than annuals.
Well, some annuals.
Even some
yeah,
annuals.
yeah.
They have
But
viola,
anyway, it's
yeah.
kind of tough in the spring when you plant something and say, oh, this would be really neat if we had some tulips coming up around it, but tulips aren't available then. Right now, you can buy the tulips, put them in the ground, and then plant something right on top of it, which is really kind of nice to do. We get bigger plants this time of year because they've been growing for the whole year, and the nursery was just going to up pot them.
Oh, or they're
divide.
They're
them.
on sale.
Right.
They're on sale. Some are 40% off.
Yeah.
The other day.
So they'd reprice the shrub is bigger. They divide the perennial, buy it now, and you can get more. We always loosen and spread pot bound roots, and we'll show you doing that a little bit later. Fall is a lot less hectic than the spring. Spring is that whole bit with everything is coming up gangbusters.
And everything's got to be done by Memorial Day or when John graduates from high school or somebody has a party.
Yeah, it's also nice to be outdoors. Garden centers are running sales. We bought a number of things at 25% off today. 40% off.
It was 40%. Yeah.
And you're designing without flower, which is really, really good to do. If you're not focusing on the flower of the plant, you're taking advantage of the leaf, the texture, the form. It's really very nice to do. You're probably putting in more evergreens, and probably you're paying attention to fall color that most people miss entirely. And be aware of watering in the fall, and light potting soil root balls that float. Literally, they come up like corks.
They pop up.
If you put them in late, they can, as the ground freezes, get squeezed up. And if the shoulder sticks up above ground, if the shoulder of the pot is sticking up above ground, it acts as a wick and the plant dries out. People say, oh, it heaved and it died. It didn't heave and die. It dried out.
And died.
And then it heaves even more because it has no roots holding it in. So these notes are written for you just so that you can look at, we're going to go through these things as we go along, but that's why we call this saving time and money.
One other thing we didn't mention, you're in better shape in the fall than you are in the spring.
All of the time.
Every year.
Always better off. But we're going to focus on the planting part of it now, on how we plant, why it's important to plant in carefully. And a lot of the things that we're going to be showing you and talking about are explained in more detail in the outline that we gave in the webinar called Plant It Well. So if you go to our website, to our audience materials page on the webinars, you'll find Plant It Well, and you can look at the pictures, but we're going to show them those as we go along.
Yep.
Okay. So fall is just the best planting time. And it was traditional. These guys have top hats and coats on, and you'll notice that the trees are bare.
Do you see any burlap? Do you see any soil?
Yeah.
They're bare root, and look at the root systems.
Yeah. It was always the way that plants were planted, big woody plants. They were planted bare root and mostly planted in the fall because that was the time that you harvested your crop and distributed them to people. And
they were lighter weight. They were easier to ship if they could keep the.
Yep. But things changed when marketers saw that we were anxious to buy more stuff in the spring. And so we started getting more things with contained root systems. But plants don't contain their root systems.
You think about that.
Yeah,
where the roots actually are going.
This is an actual diagram of the root system of this mountain ash. It's from a book called Understanding Roots by Robert Couric, but this and many, many other drawings like this are in a book that hasn't been translated from the German yet, or it wasn't when we last looked, where they trenched up to the tree, next to the tree, and across the other side, and mapped all the roots that they found. And time after time after time, the pattern is that the plants grow very wide roots near the surface, and they only go down a certain depth. So,
and that tree, it's a little bit more than 2 meters deep.
Yeah. So there's just about at the deepest some of the roots go to 6 feet. These out here are never going to go to 6 feet. They're just going to keep going wide, and they will generally go not just out to the drip line, which is what we're sometimes told,
beyond,
but well beyond, usually 2 and 3 times as wide as the tree is wide. And if you understand that and start looking at plants, then you can understand better how to plant them. Here's a probably 3-year-old spruce seedling. It's a seedling. It grew by itself. This is the root system it's supposed to have. This is its entire root system. You can see that how tall it is versus how wide. They didn't go deep. They went wide. These roots go. That's the way that they're supposed to grow. Some plants have a taproot.
To start.
This is a mulberry. Many of us pull up mulberries and curse them on a regular basis. Mulberries develop a strong gravity sensitive, it goes down, and the roots then develop off to the sides. Eventually this root stops going down. It doesn't go down forever, but it does help anchor the plant against us who try to pull it. And if you look, you'll see that other plants, these are all seedlings that you can dig up and look at, what does a seedling look like? If you can see the roots of the seedling, then you will know how to transplant the big plant. Yep. This is Pulsatilla vulgaris. It's called windflower or pasque flower. Blooms in the springtime. It's a beautiful plant. And you can see the taproot that it has. And taprooted plants, here's another one. This is a fir. I'm sorry, this is a juniper.
Yep.
A upright juniper. You can see the taproot and the main roots developing off it, going out to the side. This is a seedling. That's all of its roots, its entire root system. So it's going wide and shallow with one taproot going down. This is a fir, a seedling fir, and it has a taproot. See it going down there with roots developing off the side. There's the taproot. And some plants have a taproot. Oaks, it's by species. Oaks tend to develop a taproot, but take a look here. Here's 1.5 meters, so 4.5 feet. So going down about 3 feet or so, a taproot. And then it peters out. It's not going to keep going down. That's what it's doing. It's anchoring. And now these other roots are going to take over from there. So there's a little fir. This is a little bitty fir that's probably just 2 years old. There's its taproot and side roots. Here's an older fir. There's the taproot. And the side roots are what are developing at great rate. How do you get a whole root system if you want to move something around?
Yeah.
You're going to look and say, here are the flare roots. They are the important ones. The taproot, if it has a taproot, and the flare roots on a woody plant are what you want. See how these are thicker? These roots are thicker as they hit the taproot or the trunk. They thicken greatly as compared to ones that come in and are
stay the same.
All woody plants, trees especially, but even shrubs, have flare roots, roots that flare and get wide very quickly right near the trunk.
And show a little bit of...
shows a flare. They become the buttress that actually holds the tree up. And those flare roots also grow out much more quickly than any other roots. They are the driving force behind getting a good root system.
And so they get bigger.
Bigger around, yeah.
Yep.
So this is a perennial, not a woody plant. Brunnera or big leaf forget-me-not, it's a seedling. It's showing you what kind of root system it has. A thong type root. They're flexible wide roots with wide roots going out to the side. If you know what the seedling looks like and that the plant is about yay tall and it has about twice that much root, these were spread out to the side. Then you know when you're digging to plant this tree and this decrepit tree has not been taken out yet, that when you dig into roots out here, and people are asking me as we're digging, well, whose big roots are those? People.
There's a tree.
They're that tree's roots, and those roots go a long way. At every chance, watch how they grow. So watch that seedling, take a look, learn how they grow. And then here's an older Brunnera. And if you look, see the leaves are a little leaf and two bigger leaves with kind of a thong type root. See the little leaf and the bigger leaf and the thong type root coming off of it? It'll tell you that that's something that can grow.
That you could take that piece off.
And we always divide in the fall. If we're going to move something around, we're going to divide it. This Brunnera, it's a big clump, sure, but this Brunnera has diameter wise, if we spread the roots all the way out, has 3 feet of a 3-foot circumference where it's gathering water from. If I divide it up into 4 pieces, each of them with roots sticking out 2 feet to each side, I've got 8, 10, 12 areas to gather water, and I get a bigger plant faster. It's just a matter of math. So we divide when we move in the fall. We even divide when we buy in the fall. If we can divide it, we divide it. So that pulsatilla that I showed you earlier with the taproot, this is not a pulsatilla, it's a balloon flower, but the same thing happens to pulsatilla. That one taproot starts getting other roots that you can divide by just slicing, as long as I've got buds on the top.
Get an eye or a bud.
I have a potato and the taproot, you've got another plant.
It's another whole plant.
Yeah. So look how they grow. This is a parodia, a very nice small tree, but too big for the courtyard, as it turned out for our friend Pam. And she said, I want to take it out. I said, could we move it? Could we move it? Because
of
it would be a
course
good
we
thing.
asked.
Yeah. So in the fall, one year, we pruned the roots. We dug a trench around a third of the tree. And here, as we're getting ready to move it, here's the roots that developed after we root pruned it.
All those
fine
hair roots, they just went.
We did that in the fall. The next spring, we root pruned another third. So there's roots over there with hair roots on it. And then the following fall, we cut, see they're cut clean. We cut the rest of the way around and moved the tree. The tree then moved as a shrub would or a perennial wood with lots of small roots within the area you can move, rather than out there 20 feet away from the trunk of the tree, the way you know that they are. And they grow back really quickly.
Well, that was a cut, right?
We cut that in the spring. This is in August, and that's a Norway spruce. This is a seven sun shrub, Heptacodium, and you can see the very big
root cut.
Why did we do that? We did it in April because we found out we had to move we move or lose our seven sun at the zoo. They're building a wolf exhibit on top of it. So we pruned in the spring and we moved it that fall.
Here's the two seven suns. This one got beat up by the deer, and
I mean, the deer just destroyed it with his antlers.
It was really beat up, but it was planted the year before. Look at the roots and how spread out they came. And this is the one that's going to replace it.
Our client, even though this one grew back after being beat up, she said, I want something that's bigger right away. So this one is what this one was 1 year before.
Yeah.
And if you look at the one that's going in now, can you see that the roots that should have gone out to the side were contained by the container and are swirled around here?
And
and we've cut them. We pruned them. We said, no, you can't swirl around.
You can't go around.
Can't do that.
How big do trunks get?
Because we know they'll grow. We did exactly the same thing to this one last year, and look how much grew.
Not only that, if you looked at the back pictures, the foliage was so much nicer. Look at the foliage.
Yeah, it is. It's a healthier plant.
But
and we found this out by learning about roots. So if we're going to move something, and this one had to be moved right away. We were moving in the spring. We had no chance to root prune. So, well, that's the way it goes. I'm going to dig around it. I'm going to trench around it in an area wide enough to take some good roots. It's got about a 3-inch trunk on it, 2.5-inch trunk, which means that I should be 2.5 feet away from it if I want to get some substantial roots to move with it. So I trench around it. And as I trenched, I'm cutting roots, just like I did on that 7 sun we were planting. But I followed this root out to show you how far it goes. I followed this one all the way to the end.
And you could, more you look at roots, the more you could identify where they're coming from. They often look very similar on their bark to the tree that they're from.
Yeah, this is a ginkgo.
Or a smell or something.
And we were looking to save the flare roots by cutting 2.5 feet away from the plant for a 2.5-inch trunk. We were hopefully ensuring that a flare root that's cut, here's a flare root, since this trunk is 20 inches in diameter,
or bigger,
20 feet out, that flare root, which is still big at 20 feet out, not as big as you see here next to the trunk, but it's still big at 20 feet out. If I cut it at closer than 20 feet, chances are that it will rot, and that rot will go up into the trunk and weaken the whole tree. So you want to move them early if you can. If there's something wrong with your plant, move it then, not later. Here's a tulip tree that we're planting. We planted it in the spring. I think this one was in the spring. Or it was in the summer.
No, it was in the summer.
Yep. And we are looking for the flare. It's in a container. What happens in containers is that the flare gets buried
Almost
almost
all,
100% of the time.
yeah, we
They-
haven't found one.
They
yet.
add soil on top. So we've taken the soil off, the client is rinsing it, and I'm pulling roots away from the trunk. I'm pulling the roots that don't
Literally.
belong there. I'm peeling them away because they're not attached to the trunk. They just grew up from the sides and lapped over those flare roots. I'm peeling them all away and laying them out over the side. And then we plant it
We
with the
found
flare
root.
at the level of the soil.
And that's about the size of the tree that
Right.
we got. They were,
So you're looking at a tree that's 9 feet tall in a little bitty, it's been grown in an 18-inch pot. And you know now that it should have 9 feet of root at least on each side. Instead, it's got this little bit so that the person who wants to buy it can take it home right now.
we put it in his van. Take it
And
home.
that was 5 years ago. And this is that tree.
That's looking up.
And this is that
Oh,
tree.
sorry. I pointed at the screen again.
They grow
5
well.
years.
The smaller that you start them, the faster that they grow, because the more root you can take in terms of ratio of root to size of the plant, the more root you can take with them.
If we could have put a 2-inch caliper tree
She's
next to it.
pointing over here.
Oh, if we could put a 2-inch caliper tree next to it,
It would have been this
it
little
would have been right about that size.
5 years later. That's the way it
Yep.
works. I've forgotten why I have a black screen here, so we'll keep going. So back to the ginkgo tree. I trench around it until I find the roots, and I cut the roots clean. So there's the tree, its canopy, slice outside the canopy, usually 10 inches deep will do it, and leave a trench open. You
Mhm.
can put loose soil in there. That's where it's going to be able to either grow new roots if you can wait, or that's where you're going to peel your soil into that trench to release, take the weight off of this root ball that you're going to move. And that's the tree after I moved it.
The main part is right here. That's the bent
Part.
over, and it
Those are the only
sprouted,
pieces.
but it's still there and still looking.
So we know that they grow, roots grow when you cut them. We know that they will transplant. This is our seventh son that we showed the roots that we'd cut in April. This is that August. We're moving it. It's August. It was the third week of August. We're trenching again around it where we trenched before, and we're pulling the soil off of the roots.
Trying to bare root it as much as we can. Remember that first shot we showed you, the guys planting bare root.
Yeah, because we're going to move this ourselves. These are volunteers that work with us at the zoo, and the average age in this group was at the time was 67, I think, and that included Alex, who's
Who's
10
13 or 12.
Yeah. So people are peeling soil off, and then it's getting scooped out of the trench. And I did the same thing to get those root systems that we showed you earlier. This is the little fur. I trenched around where I thought the roots probably went to, then loosened. And I loosened radially. Put your fork radial to the trunk.
Mhm.
There's the trunk. Go out in a radius. Put the fork in and wobble it. Put the fork in and wobble it.
Don't do it with a spade. It won't work.
Yep, loosen it all the way around, and then you can peel the soil off into your trench, just like we did here. So we're just about got everything done. So now we're cutting under it, and there's not
Working.
much root there.
Not under,
We've
no.
got the roots. They grow shallow.
And you can
Rinsing off the rest of the soil.
tip it over.
Yep, and then we carried it. That group that you just saw, we carried this nearly 20-foot tree out, and you can still see it.
If you go to Detroit Zoo at the Australia
Outback Adventure, you'll
Adventure,
see
it's
that tree.
right there.
3 of us did this. Sergeant Hemlock, the branches are tied up here so that I can work under it, and I'm digging around it in the size of the ball that I can take, which
Yeah.
is limited by the sidewalk and the gas meter.
And at this time, we weren't taking things as bare root as we didn't have done in the future.
Well, we figured we could
Yeah.
take it for the sake of
Yes.
having had to cut, because I sawed and clipped all these roots clean, cut them clean. Then we put it onto a ball cart, and Mary and Julie and I took it over to its new home, where we put it and took good care of it, which we'll
Real
show
good
you later.
care.
And it was pale for 3 years.
3 years. It just sat there basically.
A 4-inch trunk is going to sit there for 4 years. In year 4, it went and just started growing again.
And then you had to start pruning again.
Yeah. So if you're going to transplant something in your garden, and most of us have something we want to transplant because we put it in and watched it grow and thought, uh-oh, I shouldn't have put it there.
Mhm.
look at how tall it is. It's as tall as my trowel. Figure that the roots go about twice that far. Lay out your trowel twice that far and do your digging out, starting out there. For those of you who are familiar with John Weaver's work, Professor Weaver at
Nebraska.
University of Nebraska in the 20s and 30s, he trenched next to prairie plants and agricultural crops and a lot of trees and shrubs, but the prairie plants made this famous picture that shows 15 feet deep roots on some of these plants. You know you're not going to get 15 feet of root. You're not going to move all of that, and yet the plant will grow on your perennial. This is a Baptisia. Baptisia is in the group there. Here, Baptisia falls indigo right there. And you're looking at, 8 feet of roots.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was well established. We cut under it. We cut the roots. See, they're sliced. And we divided it into pieces and moved it, and all the pieces made it.
Just fine.
So what questions do we have so far? Margaret will let you do that. And anyone who has thought of a question but not typed it into chat, open your chat window. The menu is either at the top or the bottom of your screen. If you take your cursor up there, open your chat window and type them in. What do we got, Margaret? Anything?
Well, Ruth says flare roots have been cut routinely for sidewalk replacements. Will those trees survive?
They do survive. It's amazing what they survive, but they do have cavities inside of them, many of them, and become dangerous trees. It's not a good thing to cut flare roots, especially when you're talking a tree that's 60, 70, 80 feet tall. But that's what foresters are for. City foresters make the decisions on dangerous trees and take them out.
Okay, and Michelle Armstrong has a question. I took off all the dirt off of a container of viburnum. The flare roots had turned completely 90 degrees under the main stem. I thought I had to cut it off if I couldn't straighten it. Bad idea?
No, not a bad idea. That's what growers should be doing, is they should, as they up pot or move these things to a different size container to grow on for us, they should be cutting those roots. They will grow back, but if you leave them bent and that root gets bigger and bigger around, that bend becomes a cutoff point. The root will girdle itself, just like when you clamp a hose, a garden hose, and the water stops going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So cut them.
Okay, and Joyce says, how do you lift and move a tree with a 9-foot diameter root system?
Well, you don't usually take a 9-foot diameter root system unless you take it totally bare root.
And even then, it takes a lot of people. You're not going to do it with 3 or 4. It's going to take 10 to 12. It took for both of the trees we moved.
Yeah, and I took the ginkgo tree out. Well, we've moved those Japanese maples that you've moved, for instance.
Yeah, but
that the ginkgo that I showed you taken out, that had over a 6-foot root system. It would have had a 9-foot root system or greater, but I cut it. I said, I'm not taking that bigger root system.
And some trees,
Right.
it depends on the weight of the crown. I mean, if the crown is really heavy, like the Peronia was, it was much heavier than we expected.
Yeah, it did take a few of us to move that Peronia, even when we took it bare root. We had to hop it up onto the sidewalk, and it was hard to lift that tree.
Yeah.
Anything else? Margaret is looking at the chat window. If you are not familiar with chat, take your cursor, your mouse, and go up to the top or the bottom of your Zoom screen, and a menu will appear. If you open the chat, you can type in a question to everyone, press return, and it'll pop up where we can see it. Well, actually, Steve and I are not looking at them right now. Our good buddy, Margaret Thiel, is looking at them and lining them up so that when we're in a question session like this, we can have you, we can know what's up. If you
Got a couple more.
Okay, go.
Why don't tree nurseries dig certain, i.e. oak, red maple, etc., field-grown trees in the fall?
A lot of nurseries do dig them in the fall, but a lot of nurseries also container grow their plants because they say that people are asking for containers and they're more mobile.
And maybe those particular nurseries have had experience where they didn't have success digging in the fall.
For instance,
for
hemlocks,
certain trees.
right? For instance, hemlocks are said to move better in the spring, but they do dig in the fall. A lot of them dig in the fall, and then they pot them up or put them in containers, or they ball and burlap them for sale in the spring. There's just so much that they can do during the season. And a lot of times that I think, for instance, at Ray Wiegand's, the fall dug stuff would start showing up in September. So a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff you're seeing at nurseries, they did just dig and ball and burlap, but they're
Yeah.
not selling them.
Not so
root.
many are doing ball and burlap anymore. A lot of nursery, a lot of container growing plants
Right.
now.
Yep,
And
And a lot of them are not grown in the field at all. They're just
they're
grown from
in
one
the
container.
container to another, and that causes
Causes
other
problems.
issues.
But we'll let you watch Planted Well to do all of that.
So Gretchen asks, so should I dig up a shrub that I planted earlier this year and I suspected that the root was twisted? Should I dig it and look?
Yep. Yeah, it's better to, for us anyway, it's better to dig it up. If we did not assure ourselves that the roots were in good shape, we can assume that they're not in good shape.
We have done some trees 3 times.
Yes, and it's better to give the plant a chance than to watch it decline and then move it once it's in decline.
Or gets too far.
Yeah, they do get too far. We've got some pictures we'll show you of one that we just dug and looked at this year, this week.
Mm-hmm.
And is there any benefit of adding a root hormone when transplanting?
Maybe. There are certainly some species that root more readily if they get a little more auxin. That's a plant hormone that the plants make themselves. But the jury's kind of still out on that one. For small plants grown in soilless mix and potting mix,
Yes.
the rooting hormone certainly seems to help. For things grown as cuttings who have no roots, that it certainly helps. But for a plant that's grown in the ground, to add hormones to an active garden soil is probably like adding salt to the sea. There's a lot of that already there. Okay, so we're going to move on, because if we can make it through the material that we already set up, then we'll add what we've done today.